Hello, welcome to Skull RPG Podcast. My name's Dwight Skull.
My name's Jacob Skull.
And today we're going to teach you how to tell your story.
So our next one in our ongoing series of talking about all the modules that all of the different systems we've been talking about is Shadowrun.
So Shadowrun is a great game. So Shadowrun, in a nutshell, is functionally, it's the year, I think it's like the year 2090, I think, or something like that. Depending on how you play it. Look, here's the deal. When I start describing this, if you've played Cyberpunk 2077, it's going to sound
exactly
it's going to sound a lot like this because the two are very. Look, I don't know that CD Projekt Red actually took and got rights for Shadowrun, but they definitely borrowed heavily.
The problem is that Shadowrun and the actual tabletop system of Cyberpunk were almost identical back in the 80s, so it's kind of this thing of who influenced who. It's a snake eating its own tail.
Yeah, so we'll talk about Shadowrun, and apparently we'll also talk about Cyberpunk by accident. But in the Shadowrun system, which is one I'm used to, it's basically the world is fast forward. If you like D&D and you would like to play a D&D game in the future with technology, Shadowrun is really your go-to. This is why we're covering it second, because it's the most. In some ways, it's the closest to D&D that we can get to. It's just set in the future, so it's sci-fi, and it has a lot of cool sci-fi elements. But it's still D&D because what happened is there's some cataclysmic event, I think in 2012.
2012, the world ended, but it didn't end. What happened was a different plane of existence merged into ours. And when that happened, it brought magic, it brought dragons, it brought demons, it brought...
people turned into elves, dwarves...
anything fantasy, and then you have the elves and the dwarves and the orcs and the trolls.
Trolls are just a big... think orc, but now bigger. Now, the thing is, all of these were actual people. So, you... And the thought process, what they said was, the Earth used to be like this once... And so you still had bloodlines for it. But once the phasing of the two planes kind of came out of alignment, people turned back into people. But they still had kind of the weird bloodlines of these old elves, dwarves, whatever. And then when the two planes kind of reunited again, kind of overlapped again, then that bloodline came out. So you still have humans, but you definitely have all the other races that you're kind of used to in a D&D setting. Now, not the Dragonborn or anything like that, but... the concept of an elf, a dwarf, like a half orc, kind of thing. And now you have a troll. You have different classes, but the classes they're kind of what you would expect. So there's a couple mage classes. Some are very much like a shaman mage, but some are on a techno mage. Like they use technology.
They go in, they have riggers, which have, they control different drones and stuff like that.
So a rigger's your guy down who loved Radio Shack when it was open, but... and just built a bunch of crap out of his garage.
Yep.
So
you also have a handful of traditional ones, like your standard fighters, your standard things like that, or your gishes, which are spell swords, kind of.
Yeah, a gish is a term, a D&D term kind of thing, where you've turned your mage into a fighter, or your fighter into a mage.
Through buffing, you buffing a sword through spells or other means like that.
So those things are called street samurai or whatever. It doesn't really matter. But the thing is, you have a lot of guns, you have a lot of swords, you have a lot of magic you have a lot of, and then you have a lot of hacking.
Yes.
So the entire campaign is set around you guys being functionally. You can go any way you want, but most players will do something along the lines of you guys are the street punks that are shadow runners. A shadow runner is a mercenary that's hired to go obtain secrets or power or money. You're basically a glorified thief.
Mm-hmm.
And the governments of the world have kind of collapsed, but they've been replaced by local corporations. And corporations could be global. And so and if you look at America today in 2020, corporations wield a tremendous amount of power and influence over our lives, whether we like it or not. And I'm not just talking about branding, I'm just talking about just sheer money being thrown around.
Mm-hmm.
So what happened is after the governments kind of collapsed, the corporations still had people, money, loyalty, branding. And then they just kind of sucked up other corporations or merged and became these mega corporations that could really act as a small government in an area. And certain towns might have 2, 3, 4 major corps that kind of all vie for power. And in those situations, you have Shadowrunners, where one corporation or group could hire Shadowrunners to go do corporate espionage, which could include literally like massacring a bunch of people and stealing technology or magic or both, because magic and tech are not
Or
opposed.
kidnapping their
CEO or
kidnapping their prime tech
scientist.
and bringing them over or things like that.
So many things. The cool thing about it is this, like, so if you watch any of the like Ocean's 11 type of movies, the Italian Job type of movies, any of the heist genre movies, no matter what century they're set in, this is basically that. You will be running primarily a bunch of like corporate espionage, heist type of things. There are, again, Cyberpunk 2077 just came out. You and I have been working our way through it. There are Shadowrun games that you can find on GOG.com, which is my favorite GOG. Good old
They're also
games.
on Steam as well.
Also on Steam. If you
Handful
don't...
of humble
bundles,
bundles. There we
yeah.
go. Every now and then.
Yeah, those things, it's hard to say. It's called Shadowrun Returns, and then there's a German version, and then there's a
Hong
Chinese...
Kong and
Yeah, I don't remember the names.
Don't remember the other one off
Point
the
is,
top of
if you
my
go to,
head.
if you find Shadowrun Returns, you'll find the other ones. You can find them for less than $10 a piece most of the time, and they're really good games. They're more turn-based type of games, but if you're wanting to get into Shadowrun and you play video games, you go pick up Shadowrun Returns. It's got a great storyline. It's set in Seattle in a post-apocalyptic type of future in I think it's in 2080, 2085 or something like that. And really good storyline, and you can get a good feel for how the thing plays. Well, there's a book version of that. There's a tabletop RPG version, which really spawned the games. And this is what we're talking about. I'm sure there's a ton of books, but we've only really played with the core one book, which was also so if you're used to Dungeons and Dragons, there's 3 books you have to pick up as a game master. You have to pick up the Dungeon Master's Guide, you have to pick up one of the monster manuals,
and then a player's handbook.
and you have to pick up a player's handbook. Without those 3 things, you as a dungeon master are hobbled. In Shadowrun, there's one book, and it's the Shadowrun book, and everybody gets it, and the players should have one too. And you can find them used online and in your local gaming bookstore. I know when I went up to mine, there's still like 5 or 6 copies there.
Or there's also PDFs you can download online of it too.
Yep. I'm not going to tell you to get it for free because I think you should pay for that stuff. But, hey, that's your morality, not mine. So you do what you feel is comfortable on that. But you could go to DriveThruRPG and pick up DriveThruRPG.com. They have a ton of RPG games and books, more than I could ever hope to cover here. We're only going to cover the games that we've actually played. So, we're not going to touch that whole catalog. But you can go to DriveThruRPG.com and see that there are a ton of RPG games across, almost any kind of genre you could think of. Mm-hmm. So if you ever get totally bored of D&D or any of your ones, you could literally just go to DriveThruRPG and just start perusing. I'm really thinking tens of thousands of titles. It is crazy. Kickstarter, of course, has a ton as well. Those sorts of things. But Shadowrun in and of itself is a futuristic D&D game that mixes magic and technology in a worldwide setting where you'll be playing mercenaries for hire to basically steal corporate espionage secrets in some way, shape, or form. Yes, it could involve kidnapping or rescue. It could also involve hacking and trading information, bribing. A lot of it, though, is scoping a place out, getting schematics, and literally planning a bank robbery if you were doing a Ocean's 11 type of game. So if that sounds really interesting to you, you should pick it up. It's a really fun game. I enjoy it quite a bit.
It is.
If you don't want to pick up you think your gaming group won't like it and you're into games, like video games, go ahead and just pick up Shadowrun Returns. You should be able to pick it up for less than $10 anywhere. Give it a try. You'll get a really good, fast introduction to the entire world of Shadowrun. Mm-hmm. So that's it.
Hey, thanks for listening.
And for more resources, please go to SkullRPG.com.